Arvinder Gatora works for a company that installs solar-powered solutions in homes in Kenya. He says he's seeing a consistent rise in demand from new home buyers and builders.
Now everyone is making sure that they install a solar system during the time of building. So this has worked to the advantage of solar contractors in Kenya, and which in turn means more business for us.
One such project is this new housing scheme in Nairobi, and residents say tapping the sun's energy means cheaper electricity and hot water.
So we're able to have hot water throughout the day, depending on the usage, and also in the night. Yeah, so we don't have to to put power on. You always have hot water whichever time you need during the day.
The entire continent's power generation capacity is 147 gigawatts. That's roughly how much electricity Belgium produces in a year. This isn't nearly enough to meet Africa's energy needs, and almost half of its population don't have access to electricity. Renewable resources can fill this gap, but only if at least $32 billion are invested in the industry every year until 2030. The use of renewable resources of energy is rising around the world, but nowhere is this growth faster than in parts of Sub-Saharan Africa where grids don't reach. Villagers in Cameroon are using solar cells to power filters to produce clean drinking water. Farmers in far-flung areas of Senegal are powering their communities in eco-friendly ways. And in Tunisia, the same technology is being used to power the communications infrastructure. Experts say African countries hold immense potential for solar energy because of their geographical location.
Solar energy is viable in Kenya. Kenya, lying on the equator, has some of the best solar installation in the globe. I think it's about 4.5 kilowatts per hour, so which is actually very good. And if the solar energy is well harnessed, it could actually help in stability of our grid.
Studies by developmental agencies like the World Bank show a strong link between access to electricity and higher GDP growth. And for many of the continent's struggling economies, tapping the abundant natural resources like wind, water and solar energy can lead to a brighter future. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Now, KS Energy is a power generation company based in Botswana and Nigeria, and it manages projects around Africa, including Botswana, Namibia, South Africa and Nigeria, among others. Its CEO, Steve Martin, joins us now for this subject. Steve, great to have you on the show. From your perspective, what does Africa's power sector need right now? Is it more investment? Is it more political will? What is it?
It needs more exploitation of the natural resources that Africa has. Fuel is a major issue in Africa, and the evolution of the renewables in Africa has been a very strong impetus for growth, at least allowing Africa to keep up with its population growth. The larger mega infrastructure projects of years past with imported fuels was such a heavy burden, requiring treasury guarantees and all sorts of other enhancements to make projects happen, that they just got stalled. Now the projects are downsizing, they're getting smaller, they're trying to use more indigenous fuels, and more government and public sector, private sector cooperation, public-private partnerships that are making projects happen. In effect, the African countries have just pushed back on this heavy burden and said, let's develop projects that we need. They don't have to be mega projects.
The other thing, of course, that's changed over the years is the technology has changed.
Incredible.
And renewable energy prices have come down immeasurably. How have those factors helped you in your business in Africa?
Well, it's created an entire new sector that's going after the off-grid consumers. And I don't mean individual households only, but mining sector, tourism. Those places that have been spending close to 30 cents, US cents per kilowatt hour for electricity, because of technology evolution, are able to acquire electricity at probably 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So imagine what that does to the cost of mining or the cost of tourism in relation to their overall profit. It's going to make Africa more competitive. I liken it to what happened maybe 10 years ago in Latin America and Africa with the landline versus the mobile telephone. We've seen that kind of a leap of technology in the last 3 years with renewables.
So African countries are effectively leapfrogging some of the intermediate steps and going straight to these kind of distributed energy solutions.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to be a trend going forward. And anybody that's not prepared to react to that trend isn't going to be in business. The days of pulling wires and poles for high voltage billion-dollar infrastructure investments, I think, are past.
There is a big difference, though, between Northern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa in this trend. I mean, in Northern Africa, a lot of countries are actually now kind of exporting energy to Europe because of all the renewable investment that they've had over there. But it's a very different story in Sub-Saharan Africa. How is Sub-Saharan Africa going to catch up?
Sub-Saharan Africa is really in a completely different league, if you will, in terms of where it's at today and where it's trying to get to in the short term and in the medium term. The figure is 600 million people without quality access to electricity in Sub-Saharan Africa. That number is growing. It's not getting less. Although there's more electricity available, the population and when you look at the added capacity of generation, they're not going in a crisscross way. They're still going apart. So it's going to take a lot more of these kind of investments having success in the local communities and people embracing them, and investors and companies like ourselves that are going to have to embrace this size of a playground versus the billion-dollar projects that we were maybe used to 5 years ago.
Right. Would love to catch up with you again in the future and see where you're going. But for now, Steve Martin, KS Energy, thank you very much for coming in to talk to us.